Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Journey to Purpose. With me this week, I have the wonderful Barbara With. She is an international peace activist, award winning author, intuitive psychic, and a spiritual teacher. Barbara, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
First, very easy question is where in the world are you?
At this moment, I am in Madison, Wisconsin.
Very nice. Hopefully, not too hot, not too cold.
We're doing okay now. I actually live, though, in an island in Lake Superior in far
Oh,
northern Wisconsin.
wow.
So I'm
That
down
sounds
here for the
cool.
winter. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I'm glad you made the journey.
hmm
So you've got a really interesting background, lots of different things. Can I ask you first of all, just take us back to the beginning and what was the journey that led you into this sort of range of peace activism, consciousness and channeling?
It was actually a combination of music, which is what I started out as a composer and a performer, a singer. I started writing
Amazing.
music when I was 12. And
Wow.
um, and kind of a coincidence that I had a friend in high school whose mother was a psychic. And so I wasn't looking for a psychic. One day, Mike just said, "Hey, you should come see what my mom does." I was like, "What does your mom do?" She says, just come and see. And his mom was, we didn't call him channeling then. She was just a psychic, but she would light a candle. She had this beautiful picture of Jesus. She'd close her eyes. She's very grandma, I guess, like I might
Oh,
look today, but I might have been 16 when I first went to her. And she'd close her eyes and she would talk. And she never said that she was anybody. She kind of just said that she was like an antenna that
mm.
could pick up information about people and then read it back to them. And what she told me was like she had been in my head. And I had a
Oh,
very
wow.
traumatic childhood, and it just made me weep. And so I went to her on a regular basis through the years as I was becoming a musician. Let's say I was world famous in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so it was 1987. So I'd been a musician for about 15 years on the road. I started to automatic write. People know what that is. It's where some higher information kind of takes over the hands. And I was writing a letter that was very judgmental. I was angry at somebody, and it shifted the whole tone to this sort of like, yes, because when you're judgmental, like the lens of an eye, it closes down and all you see is a small portion, which was news to me, at the moment. I was like, what? But because of Eunice, I knew what it was, but it was still very odd. It was happening. And so I was typing and said, "Who are you?" And the answer was sound. And at the time, I don't know, at that time, I was probably in my early 30s. I'd been working with music for so long that felt very comfortable to me. Like, okay,
Mm.
whatever that means, I'm okay with it. And so I became a psychic, a practicing psychic, as you might say, in Minneapolis, where I was growing up or living. And yeah, that's kind of how I came to it.
It's quite, I guess it was that you've had that exposure because I think if that happened to me, I'd be a bit like going, what's going on here? Because you'd seen it elsewhere. But for people who are listening who may be skeptical or even simply curious, what would you say channeling activity actually is and what is it not?
I think at this point in my life, after all I've been through, we all channel our own lives, right? We all have this energy flow that comes from some mysterious source, right? We're alive every day, and we have these bodies and senses and this human experience. And in a way, channeling is a part of pulling information out of the unknown and projecting it into something beautiful. So when I started writing music at 12, I was tapping into the traumatized part of my young life and I used to say the songs were already written and I would just listen for them and pull out 4 bars at a time. So musicians channel. I think anybody who does a solo, sax solo
Mm.
or piano solo or whatever. And I once heard Brian Greene, who is a premier string theorist, scientist, describe doing the math that he does. And to me, it sounded like channeling, like he goes into the nothing and he listens for the thing and he gets inspired and he has the talent to articulate it in whatever way, right? The song, the reading, the mathematical formula, the solo. So I think it's a far more natural part of life than people maybe understand.
I like that. And I know on your blog you have the Let's Ask Barb series, and you channel sort of guidance on global and personal questions. But when you receive insights about topics like incoming generations or collective consciousness, how do you personally process that and integrate it with the information you're putting out there?
I think after all of these years, I've reached this point of integration that it's truly extraordinary because it wasn't always that way. When I started channeling and becoming a psychic, it was fine. I got referrals mostly, and just people would, this was before we had recording devices, people would come to my house and you'd have the cassette player that you could give them a cassette when they left. But when I started to do group channeling, which I started in 1993, which eventually led to channeling Einstein, that
Oh, wow.
whole long journey was a great deal of mental health challenges. Because as opposed to what you might think if I'm just flippant about, oh yeah, I just woke up one day and thought I'd channel Einstein. It's like, no, I didn't even think I wanted to channel at all. And then when I started doing groups, the two women who were organizing the groups and working with me asked in a channeling session, "Who are you?" And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm an antenna and their sound, right? And they said, "You can call us angels." So that was another step of adjustment. And I'm not sure what I think of this. I'm a naturally skeptical person because I think skepticism is great. Truth will outlive the skepticism, which is the whole point of skepticism. And so in that case, Teresa and Kim and I got together and said, what do we think about this? That they're angels now. And we decided in the end that it was the fruit of what the angels were telling us that was the most telling, that our lives were changing so much for the better. We were uncovering passion and creativity that we hadn't had before. We were learning how to resolve conflicts in ways we never dreamt we could. And so we were like, I don't care if it's the Easter Bunny, whatever is being told to us is making such a huge difference. So that took some adjustment. And then the whole story of how I came upon knowing that I talked to people who'd passed over at all, right? Not famous people like the party ended up being, but just Teresa's mother and other people were appearing to me, and I learned I could talk to people in Alzheimer's comas and
Wow.
autistic people who hadn't spoke at all. So it took a lot of adaptation to it because it's kind of fantastical. I mean, for me, all I wanted to be was rock star. I mean, that's where I was going. And suddenly here we are with all this. So that I would just stress that it was a journey of continually examining my mental health.
I mean, I'm really privileged that you shared that, because I think when we look at things like channeling and spiritualism, there is an assumption that people are devout believers from the start, like that somehow, and there are people like that. I enjoy a healthy level of skepticism. And I think actually in this involving world, you kind of need that. Not because I think people aren't trustworthy. I'm innately positive. I think everyone's lovely, but I do think the flow of information, the number of sources we have now, we need to be asking ourselves, what is going on here? What am I seeing? What I'm experiencing? And with the stuff that you're describing, it makes total sense that there is internally resistance, conflict, uncertainty that you have to work through. And I guess particularly because what you're doing is not seen as mainstream. So I imagine there's the feelings of, will I be judged for this? Will I lose friends for this? And I guess, did that happen, or have you had to readjust sort of your circle of friendships as a result of this transition that you've made?
The psychic stuff was in the beginning was going parallel to my musical life. So I got out of high school 1972 and went right on the road. So that's the era that we're in. And
Mm,
it was, hippies and free love and music. And so to be a tarot reader or eventually become a psychic in that world was not such a stretch as if
mhm.
I was in a corporate setting or, in a more formalized setting. So I didn't feel that kind of thing. But when I actually started to do the channeling in the groups, and the angels had come to us and said, here's the deal. We have this theory about if humans would resolve their conflicts in this particular way, first within them that we see, we feel like the byproduct would be world peace, would be that you could change what was going on around you without going into the level that it was being created. But we need someone to test this on conflicts. And apparently, Kim and Teresa and I volunteered and were chosen to be these women. They came from, well, Teresa came from sort of a rock and roll background. She had also been a flight attendant, but Lily was a very conservative, sort of Republican business woman who would never have gone to a psychic had she not had crisis, right? This drives people. So the whole journey of figuring it all out was pretty brilliantly put together. But at one point, and this isn't my first book, Diaries of a Psychic Sorority, we had our first fight. And we got the information. I mean, it took us a while, but we got it and we used it, and it absolutely revolutionized what happened at the table that day. And it was the beginning of conflict revolution. I put it into a workshop form and began training it from the actual research and development that we had having conflicts amongst each other.
Amazing. I mean, I know the cornerstone of your work is this conflict revolution. How does that differ from traditional conflict resolution? You've mentioned resolving that inner conflict, but if people came to you, what's the process can they expect?
Well, conflict resolution is really focused on, if you and I had a conflict, how we talk to each other, good listening skills, not being judgmental, etc. Conflict revolution is something you do all by yourself. I mean, you certainly can get coaching and such, but you have a conflict, any conflict, pick a conflict. We all have conflict. And we take that and we plug it into the process, which you don't need anybody else for. And it's based on this kind of simple map of human, Einstein calls it the map of human consciousness. But it's a pretty simple system that has 3 human dimensions. We call them intellect, intuition, and emotion in the solar plexus. And then there's a witness. And it's how we choose to interact with those parts of ourselves. So if I was going to teach you conflict resolution, the first thing I would do is teach you those parts of yourself, how they operate, where they are, how they're supposed to interact, what it looks like when they're all aligned, and where the conflict is, and then how to resolve the conflict in the way that's appropriate to that system. So it's much different than let's you and I go solve the conflict we had last week. And it gets deeper into the root. So my conflict with you, it's not rooted in you. It's a product of my patterns and the way that my operating system works. So when I first go to myself and use the trigger of you, maybe you've been really disrespectful to me lately. Like I was writing that letter. It's like, you're so judgmental. It's so bad to make judgments. You know, we have these conflicts. And then I revolve the focus of them to me. So I've identified, well, you don't respect me. All right, there's my soundbite. Now, as a witness to myself, I'm going to make a commitment to pay attention to these 3 dimensions and see where I'm not respecting myself, other people. Because if I'm triggered by that in you, then it is the sign of what's going on in me. And then when we resolve that, most of the time, I wouldn't say all the time, my conflict with you resolves. And there's an energetic shift to where either you rise to the occasion to reflect that, or you disappear. You move out of my life, or if you're not ready to do that. And it's really quite amazing how it manifests rather than we manipulate.
I love this. And I definitely think that reflects with some of the work that I've done around sort of psychology and neuroscience. And I had one client who had a conflict with his mum for various reasons, doesn't matter. But he had to shift himself before that relationship changed. Because the way, I mean, like, it was really interesting to observe them, because essentially it was like he was a grown man and obviously she was a grown woman, but it's like they left the relationship when he was like still 13 years old, and he'd revert to that behavior and she'd revert to that behavior. And so he had to do a lot of work on himself to get himself out of that mindset, to resolve his own internal conflict before she would respond. And thankfully she did respond, and they've got a really good relationship now. And I think more and more I see, well, more and more I've come to understand the problem I have isn't with you, it's with myself. if I am triggered by something, it's because of something in me is triggered internally. I just haven't heard it explained in that way as an internal conflict. But I think you're right. I think the only thing we can control is ourselves. And so ultimately it makes sense that if we have an external conflict, the actual trigger is internal, not external.
Yes. And what I love about conflict resolution is that it really encompasses, like you're talking about. Okay, this is like not my new information. This is a compilation of the kinds of understanding of working within. Like, what does it mean to go within and work? Well, this gives us a really simple roadmap. And when we understand that how it's supposed to be, is that emotions are supposed to be flowing, all of them, and they flow up through the heart and they create the intuition, which is the next most advantageous step for the good of the whole system, because that's how compassion works, and at our root is compassion. We can get into that. But then it flows up into the intellect, and the intellect is where the free will is actually implemented. So intuition can tell you turn left, but it's from the intellect that the neural functioning with the hand and the thing. So basically free will has been given the power to say no to God within us, telling us the next most advantageous step. And you've done it, I've done it. Rest. Your body, your intuition, rest. Your intellect says, I'm not going to rest. I've got a million things to do. I have to get on it. And then off you go and you make the decisions and you go. And Einstein says that place between the intuition and the intellect, that is the root of every conflict that manifests in humanity. That if humanity were living by this alignment to their intuition and making decisions for the intuition for the good of the whole, that when we get there is when then we start to really manifest the abundance and the greatest good that's coming out of us because we're working for the greatest good.
I love that idea. And again, I reflected to my own life where years ago I got a job. I was approached by one of the big four, so one of the big four companies in the UK, Deloitte, KPMG, and it's quite prestigious. And at that time, I'd been in the corporate world for a while, and I felt like I had arrived. Like it was like it's one of the big four. Like it must be. I'm going to learn everything. I'm going to be the best. But I had this little feeling, which I ignored, which was, but I don't think I'm that kind of person. I don't think that's the environment for me. And I went, and it's the shortest job I've had. I was there for 6 months, and I was miserable the whole time. And again, everything has its pros and its cons. And since then, I have consciously tried to listen to my intuition, to listen to that feeling. I mean, I haven't called it intuition, but gut feeling, I call it. And when I don't, invariably, it will come back and bite me because it was right in the first place. And I ignored it because my intellect said, no, this is the strategic choice, or this is the smart choice. My intuition goes, no, it's not the choice for you, though. And what I am curious about, though, so I can see how that totally plays out, is how you link it to the collective conscious now, and how you talk about, so we get ourselves aligned, we listen to our intuition, and suddenly the world gets, well, not suddenly, but the world becomes a better place. So how does that flow?
When we do this work and we first resolve these inner things, and plus there's a shift in then how we process. So none of us grew up knowing what to do with emotion. Nobody taught us any of that. So there's a lot of misunderstanding about, well, we shouldn't be feeling the tough ones and anger is whatever, don't stay away, whatever. But what we teach is that all of them have a part in creation. And the more that we can embrace them through our breath and our body work to breathe them up and kind of rechannel them away from the thinking process. Because you know how it is. You feel anger, it flows up, it triggers an angry thought that's generally about projection because it's easier to blame somebody else. And when we shift all that, we start to literally manifest different outcomes in our immediate life. But we are one being, all of us humans. I believe that this is one, we are all one. We're different facets of it. So when I take my facet and create that pure alignment to compassion and that commitment to doing what's best for the good of the whole and following through and taming my intellect, I affect a whole lot more than just my life. And part of that is because by the time I got to Einstein, which is a long story, but I did a book in 2007 called Imagining Einstein, Essays on M-Theory, World Peace, and the Science of Compassion. And I just, in the past 3 or 4 years, had discovered that I was speaking to him. And that took me 3 or 4 years of adjustment, because when I first channeled him, it was the voice of all of my readings.
Right.
And it was so shocking to me that, what? What? Einstein was, you've been at the root of all this? It was the voice of sound. So he delivered in that book, Imagining Einstein, a unified field theory, which is something scientists have yet to discover, how the math is the same at the macro as it is at the micro, with the map of human consciousness. But the most profound thing was he defined compassion, and I say with a capital C, because he turned it into a scientific force. He called it the fifth fundamental force, and the creative intelligence that uses the four fundamental forces to impel the creation of the physical world one step at a time. And compassion does that by exerting its influence, I guess, on energy. And the long story short, at the root of what we are made of, he says, is compassion. So in the collective, and it's in the center of the earth, is where the source is, and it operates like a black hole. So we begin in the center of the planet as a particle and becomes a gravitational wave that has those three human dimensions that flow through the earth, break out into what we call the lens, where our bodies are and you're projecting and perceiving. And it continues on through the heavens and hooks up with the earth's electromagnetic field. And it's like this string of string theory. So he proved that if I change my energy field, I'm a part of the earth and I'm impacting and influencing the entire planet because of that gravitational wave. Now, it might just be my little thin thread of awareness, but think of if we all had that awareness and that intention. And we're getting there. I know it doesn't look like it many days, but we are. And so when I change the inner world and then I change my outer world in my local universe, I think that's the hope and the promise of my eternal world peace tour, recruiting the participation of the willing who want to do a worldwide nonviolent action to end the age of war by doing this. We stop warring with ourselves. We stop warring with our family. We stop warring with the community. We start warring with all those things outside us. And that's the grand experiment. Is I believe if it's done this for me internally, that it's the key to a global change as well.
It's great. And I think going back to your sort of stuff around Einstein and the molecules and how they're all connected, one of the rules of thermodynamics is that everything is energy. So, you can see how that trail would grow and follow from that. With your work on the World Peace Tour and your peace initiatives, what does peace activism look like in everyday life to you? Like beyond marches or movements and what kind of gives you hope with the practices that you carry out yourself?
I have also been an activist. I've been somebody fighting for peace externally. I was a water protector. I was an investigative journalist. I did a lot of those external peace I've done a lot of peace actions, nonviolent actions. And there came a point where I realized that that's all well and good, but it's when I take care of myself. It's when we as humans start with ourselves and take control of our own domain and purposely and intentionally stop this war between our head and our hearts, whatever it is. Then as we flow, we become much more able to influence the world around us, even if it's just a simple thing like, when you're in a bad mood or you're triggered by everybody, it's really hard to be cheerful and kind. But when we're in this flow, we have more of a propensity to bring that kindness, like we're not so absorbed in me, because we're taking care of ourselves. What can I give the world? Well, for me, one thing is kindness is so free. You don't have to pay for it. It's there every day. And I just think we underestimate the power of those really small things to facilitate a change in the world.
I love that. And again, it's not big, is it? I mean, it's not like you're going out there and as you say, protesting and doing that. You're just being kind to people. I think we underestimate the power of kindness in general, or the power of, and I have a game I play. So I'm from the north of England, but I live in the south these days. And when I go into London, which isn't that often because I don't live near London, but on the underground, on the tube, I like to smile at people and see what happens. It's a little game I play because in the north, if you'd smile at someone, we'd have a chat and get on, it'd be lovely. In the south, they kind of look away and think you're crazy. But every now and then, I just play this game of smiling at people. And do you know what? Most of the time, they don't think I'm crazy. Sure, some do. Even something like smiling can have such positive effects on people, and we underestimate that. But I think the challenge for me, personally, is when I'm lost in my own world. So when I'm thinking about all the things I have to do, or whatever stress it is, or my family responsibilities, we forget. I always say it's not that I'm selfish, not that anybody I think is selfish, but we just forget about other people. It's a difference between going out your way to be mean to someone versus just not being aware of them. So, do you have any practices that help you to kind of remain that mindful of other people? Is something that you've grown over time as well?
I think that the reason that we get in that place that you're talking about, where we just forget about other people, is because we don't know how to take care of our needs. We don't
Hmm.
know what our needs are on this basic level, and we don't know how to take care of them. And even when we do know, as somebody who has been teaching this for decades, there is a time where it's hard to get yourself to want to do that hard work of stopping. You're worried about this and the mind is going like that. And then there's anxiety. And so what conflict resolution does, it breaks it down to such a small step that sometimes it's hard to do when your mind is racing, because it's like, it can't be that simple. And it's two parts. And one is that relationship to emotion, is that we have a need to feel and breathe and move emotion. That's a need that we have. And when we don't get to do that, or when we project it on other people, it just gets trapped in there. And then things start to pile up. So we learn a new way to process emotion, which is just with breath. So rather than psychology, it's more like yoga, intentionally moving. Okay, this is anger. I've got a couple of sound bites I use when I have to move anger, which is, I don't need to know why I feel angry. I just need to sit here and feel and breathe it and release it and let it go, and not let it get to a thought that's going to define it as something outside me and project it. So, and then the second one is that what is the state of your intellect? Is it
Mm.
wild horses constantly running all over the place? Well, there's other skills that we employ to deal with that constant steady stream of self-talk. And one of them is to listen. So you don't have to shut up yet. You just have to listen to find out what is the root of your problem. And so if we're going to do a little psychology with ourselves, it's like, get to the soundbite, chop it down into the thing. Well, it's that I don't have enough time. Okay, so there's the soundbite that we're going to bring into our awareness, and you begin to revolve that idea. Because what happens is you get anxious, it comes up. This I don't have enough time is the reality, and pretty soon that's what you're creating. So we pull
Mm.
it back and we reverse it, saying, I have plenty of time. As I feel and breathe, now I'm fueling that thought with what formerly had been fueling the anxious thought. But emotion doesn't have to be happy or positive to manifest. You can
Hmm.
have all kinds of anger and flow them into really creative thoughts about what you want to create, and they have that impact. But that's how small it is. And I will attest, and after all these years, I still have those. We call it stomping on sidewalks. When you go out and you're like, I'm not like that. It's not me. It's her. She's doing it, and then it's like pretty soon, you like a toddler, you wear out and then you go to sleep, you know, and then we start again. And it's a laborious process, but when you get to the outcome, kind of the aha moment where maybe you're wondering like, well, where am I not doing these things? And then you see
Mm.
yourself and you catch yourself in the act of sabotaging yourself or all those things that you were worried about. There's this aha moment we call hanging and dang. So you're like, so sure, it's her, it's her, it's her. And then you see yourself and you have this dang, dang. It's me. It's me. No. And then then you move on the other side of it. And the outcomes are so, talk about creative expressions of unexpected outcomes. Just a brief story. I had a woman in a classroom in Norway who brought her conflict was her stepmother or her mother-in-law. Mother-in-law wanted to deport her. She was from Barbados, married to a pretty rich Norwegian. 25 years. Her mother-in-law wanted to deport her. And so we start getting into the process and the this and feeling the feelings. And she gets halfway through and she's like, you know where this is going. I said, I do, but not because I'm psychic, but it's a formula, but you
Mm.
tell me. And her eyes welled up and she got all teary and she said, I'm homesick. I said, why haven't you gone home? Well, I've got the kids and my husband. It's like, how old are your kids? I'm thinking, 2 months and whatever, 2 years. 14 and 17. It's like, how many lies was she telling herself? Married to a very wealthy Norwegian guy, got healthy, happy 14-year-old, 17-year-old. You can't go home. And when she broke through that lie, because it's like, I want to deport myself. Oh my God, I do want to deport myself. And she came back the next day and she said, my whole relationship, we call it the Rolodex effect. You know, Rolodex used to be like telephone things you'd write on paper and you go flip, 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 flip all the way back.
They were so cool.
I love my Rolodex, but how many interactions did I have with my mother-in-law that were me? That was me projecting onto her. How many? I mean, she was saying this. I just couldn't believe my whole relationship with her through time changed. And she goes back regularly. I'm sure she's brought the family, probably brought her mother-in-law.
I mean, what I find and listen to you, I think you're saying the same thing. There is a challenge with all of this, which is being self-aware or open enough to not lie to yourself. And it goes back to that emotional processing, I think, that you mentioned at the start, which is, and I, because of the work I do in therapy, I often say that I think people have an emotional health problem, not necessarily a mental health problem, but it turns into a mental health problem. And it turns into one because we don't know what to do with our emotions. And so we bottle them up, or they get outletted in the wrong way, and then things can escalate. Do you have sort of, I mean, I guess it's the same with therapy, that sort of therapeutic alliance, that trust for someone to let go and open up to you. So have you encountered anybody who just has refused to kind of acknowledge within themselves that there could be a problem within themselves?
When I first started training, I used to say 20% of the people would have this aha moment, you know, where they're hanging and dang. 40% of the people were really excited and thought it was great ideas, but didn't really get there. And 20% went like, yeah, this is hoo-ha. And then after 9/11, 2001 in the United States, 9/11, those things changed. And I think because people were inspired to want to know how to make peace, and they were so afraid that when you come with this like outside the box idea and it makes sense, right? As I talk to you, you feel and it's like, well, this makes perfect sense. It's not like trying to make believe, and it's not me being the guru where I'm here to heal you. It's like, I'm going to show you this thing. And then when you have that moment where you have the aha moment, and sometimes it's hard. It's like kind of shameful. Like, oh my gosh, I did that. You know, well, good. Let's clean it up. Then everything changes so dramatically. For example, after our first fight with Kim and Therese and I, where we pulled out the transcript and said, if you're involved in the conflict, the root is within you. And it took us a while, but we brought it back to the table. We had this kind of Satori moment where we were like, oh my God, here's what I can do better. And Kim was, yes, here's what I can do. And I went to work that night. I was singing at a hotel in Minneapolis, and there had been a waitress there who really wanted nothing to do with me for the 2 years I was there, but I don't care. It just doesn't matter to me. She was so friendly that night. She couldn't put enough money in my tip jar and wanted to give me cassettes and gab, gab, gab. And I was really suspect. I'm skeptical. It's like, what do you want? What's going on here? You know? And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is what they're talking about. You affect a difference in the environment around you in ways that you couldn't make happen. I couldn't have gone in there and pulled her aside and said, hey, why do you hate me? You know, let's be friends. Things just naturally begin to shift. And when you do that, it's the hook, because it is hard work. It's really hard work. And I'm going through a conflict right now that is being triggered by a political, you know, the United States is pretty crazy right now.
Has its challenges.
Has its challenges. And I just find myself in that same place. I'm not like those people, you know, it's like, stop. You have to go in and pull back and find that place so that you can be that truly peaceful. Because that's, I think, our job is as peace workers, to become that peace and not just, yes, what a great idea, but silently, I'm going to resent you, you know. It's really hard to want to go in there, feel the horrible feelings and move them anyway, and then face that you've maybe have not been respecting yourself, and then know what to do about it. When you get that moment where it all shifts and you're liberated, this is what we were doing in the beginning when they said they were angels. It's like we kept doing this and things started just manifesting differently, and synchronicity started to happen and creativity started to flow, and you start to get addicted to that. So it becomes a little bit easier. But after all these years, it's still the work of our lives.
So So you're still human, basically, which is good to know.
Thank God,
But I mean,
too.
that, yeah, absolutely. That does raise one last question for me, which is, and you sort of mentioning the context of the US right now, and as an outsider looking in, doesn't look great for all sorts of reasons. But how do you find that peace when, and whatever side of the political spectrum you're on right now, I have my views, it doesn't matter, but either side has an issue with the other side, right? For,
Mhm.
rightly or wrongly so. How do you, as an imperfect being, find that inner peace when there's a political, social, ethical ideology that is fundamentally opposed to? I mean, if I take the easy example for us in Europe, which is like, if Nazism came back, like I'm going to be anti-Nazism. That's very easy for me to say that. But then how do I find dialogue with someone who is pro that movement? Because that opposes everything that I believe in. And that to me takes a whole lot of something. Um, and it's not easy. I mean, have you had to think about that given the current situation?
Oh, yes, yes. I just came out of a meeting yesterday with the place that I work at where I was one of 30 people. I held the opposing view. And for me, God created all kinds of life paths for me. And in 2011, I happened to be channeling and teaching in Madison, Wisconsin, when there was the uprising, a big uprising. The Democrats left the state and the Capitol was flooded with protesters for weeks and weeks. It was the beginning of the Occupy movement. It was a huge thing. And so I became an investigative reporter. And at the time, I was a liberal. And I was fighting the Republican fascists that had taken over my state and really became sort of known in the state for being a journalist that, I mean, I gave up my life and I covered everything and I drove to hearings and, the government and everything. And then in 2016, after discovering the election fraud of 2011 on the part of the Republicans, I discovered the election fraud on the part of the Democrats. And as a liberal, I had to ask myself what I was going to do because Donald Trump was rising and everybody pressured me, about Trump, Trump, Trump. You can't report on this. It'll help Hillary lose the election and we can't Trump, 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 Trump. But my inclination was, no, I need to report the truth. And just because I'm a liberal doesn't mean I should turn my head away from the horrible things that the people that I say are my party are doing. And so I did an extensive report. Not all came out it was true, the money laundering and all that, and the rigging against Bernie. And I probably lost maybe half my liberal friends at that point because they started calling me a Putin puppet and they just wouldn't look. And as I moved forward and I kept my commitment to the truth, it got harder and harder, through the COVID years. And, I'm a
We've
First
had a few
Amendment.
interesting years.
Yes. And
Strong
then
decades.
I lost more. And then, 2020 came and January 6th happened in the United States where whether you were on the left or the right, what happened to those people was a huge constitutional breach. People went to jail for years with not even being charged, much less. So because I'm really nonpartisan about these things, I want justice for everybody, not just the people. Most people don't feel that way. Most people get on their side. They think that they're right. And right now there's this huge push about calling certain people Nazis. And I just roll my eyes as I've walked through all of these years where fascism was just taking over the United States through Barack Obama and Joe Biden. It was really, those were hard years for me. My book was banned from Amazon, Conflict Revolution. The workbook was banned from Amazon. I lost work because I wasn't going to take the experimental medicine. So for me, the fascism was there already. The whole system had been fascist. And so when Trump came in, there were certain things that he undid. He brought back a modicum of free speech. He closed the border. There were 300,000 children that had gone missing, and that was concerning to me. So I have this very nuanced look at politics, and I tend not to rah, this is my side. I tend to sit back and look at the holistic piece of it, but most people don't. And I just know too much because of my background as an investigative journalist and that I follow everything really closely and I see the holistic piece of it. And what I'm finding is I think the propaganda that they've purposefully been doing to our minds through social media and whatever else you listen to, it's having an effect. It's having a very profound effect that's helping create this division. So luckily, conflict revolution, I say now, it's the original propaganda beater. It's the propaganda of your own mind that we undo. We think it's them. Okay, well, let's turn that around. And I did this with, just briefly, the governor of Wisconsin in 2011. They were stealing everything and really, truly fascists and doing illegal things and completely ignoring the law. And I thought, well, I have to revolve this. I have to revolve this. So how do I do that? Well, my soundbite, Scott Walker's doing illegal things. Well, what does that mean, though? Because I don't do illegal things. It means that he's doing stuff that if he got caught, there would be a consequence. Okay. That's mine. And that was one of the biggest revolutions that I ever did. And I never would have found that situation in my life where I had thoughtlessly, with some sort of rationalization, used one of my artist's pieces without her permission.
Mm.
And when I found it, I had to go right to her and say, hey, remember that conflict we had? And I printed up all these things. And then you said, don't do this. And I gave them away anyway. I didn't sell them or anything, and it was awful in the moment. It was very, very, very difficult to do that. But when I did it, oddly, for a brief while, all the situation with Scott Walker started to reverse. He got found guilty of this and that. But with my friend, in my effort to make amends, because that's what you have to do. You can't just say, oh, I did this, it's crappy. You have to go make amends. I wrote her a letter and I said, I'm going to pay you all the money that you would have made had I been able to sell those. And I'm so sorry. Anything else you want me to do? And a year later, she came up to me and threw her arms around my neck and she said, we were so poor, we couldn't even buy food. And I got your letter. It had $500 in it. And she said, you just saved our lives. You saved our lives. And now that piece of artwork, she has sold me. It's her own original picture of Einstein. So if you ever see a picture of me sitting in front of Einstein with the wild hair.
Amazing.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of ways to approach it. It's just, how do we inspire ourselves to do it?
Oh, love that. Barbara, it's been really interesting. Thank you ever so much. If people want to learn more, talk to you, connect with you, how can they do that?
Well, you can find me at barbarawith.com, with like the preposition. And I've got a conflict revolution challenge. If you go on my website and you look on the upper right-hand corner, it's just a little button you can click and you can take the challenge. I've got some free downloads of how to do conflict revolution and a little journal you can keep. And also, if you want a reading, I'm happy to offer a discount code of Einstein 40 and you can get 40% off the readings.
Amazing.
And yeah, reach out.
Thank you very much. I'll put that all in the show notes. Before we leave, is there any, given the work that you do in the channeling, is there anything that's come to you recently that you think that people should hear just about the state of the world in general? A broad question there.
I think that the more that we keep our focus on our own domain and keeping things in order there, rather than being worried about what's happening around us, it's inevitable, of course. But the more that we do that everyday work, don't be fooled into thinking it's a waste of time or I'm not making a difference. It is the work of our lives. And I think when people understand that, it becomes more motivating. Like, right, okay, let's do this. And that's how we're going to make the difference, I think.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you so much.
Thank you.